We've all signed things. A new phone plan, an apartment lease, or maybe just the terms and conditions on an app we've downloaded. But have you ever really thought about what makes that signature legally powerful? Turns out, not everyone's signature is created equal in the eyes of the law.
Yeah, you'd think, right? Someone signs on the dotted line and the deal is done. But here's the thing. The law has some very strict rules about who actually has the capacity to contract, and a signature from the wrong person can make a whole agreement completely worthless.
So, here's what we're going to break down. First, we'll look at the basic rules of who can make a contract. Then, we're going to get into the three main groups who are usually left out: minors, people of unsound mind, and a few other special cases. And we'll wrap it all up with a super simple checklist you can keep in your back pocket.
All right, let's jump right into the core idea. The law doesn't want us guessing. It actually gives us three clear pillars to determine who is competent enough to make a binding deal. So, Section 11 of the Indian Contract Act boils it all down to these three things. 1, you have to be of legal age. 2, you have to be of sound mind when you're making the deal. And 3, you can't be disqualified by some other specific law. Now, if someone fails even one of these tests, any agreement they sign can be considered void. And that means it's like it never even happened.
So let's tackle that first pillar, age. This is probably the most common reason a contract gets thrown out. And believe me, the law is very, very serious about protecting minors. So what exactly is a minor? Well, the definition is pretty straightforward. Generally speaking, if you're under 18, you're a minor. The one little exception is if a court has appointed a guardian for that person or their property, then the age gets bumped up to 21. For contract law, this isn't a suggestion, it's a hard and fast rule. Now, this rule wasn't just invented yesterday. It was really locked into place by a famous case from way back. Picture this, a minor, this guy Dharmadas Ghosh, borrows a pretty hefty sum of money, 20,000 rupees, and he does it by mortgaging his own property. Seems like a simple deal, right?
Well, not so fast. When this went to court, the ruling was a bombshell. It was incredibly clear. The court didn't just say the contract was flawed or could be canceled. No, it said it was altogether void. That's a massive legal difference. It means, in the eyes of the law, that contract never even existed, not for a single second.
And this brings us to a really important legal phrase, void ab initio. It literally means void from the very beginning. So what was the consequence? The moneylender was out of luck. He couldn't get his money back. The law basically decided that protecting the minor from making a bad decision was more important than protecting the adult who made the deal with him.
Okay, but the law isn't a total free-for-all for minors. It recognizes there have to be some exceptions to keep things fair. So while a minor can't be legally tied down by a contract, they can absolutely benefit from one. For instance, a guardian can make a valid contract on their behalf, and the rules are different if someone is supplying them with essential items.
This leads to a pretty interesting question. What exactly counts as necessaries? Well, it's not just a simple shopping list. It actually depends on the minor's situation in life. Basic food and a roof over their head are necessaries for everyone. For a student, books might be, but a super fancy watch? That's probably not going to fly. And here's the catch. The person who provides these necessaries can get paid back, but only from the minor's property, not from the minor directly.
Okay, on to our second big pillar, mental capacity. For a contract to be valid, the law says both people have to be on the same wavelength, and that requires a certain level of understanding when the deal is being made.
So here's the test the law uses, and it's basically a two-part question. First, can the person understand what the deal is about? And second, can they make a rational call on how that deal is going to affect them? And the really crucial part is that this is judged at the exact moment the contract is being signed, not the day before or the day after. Now, the law uses some really old-school terms here, and frankly, they're pretty outdated. But the legal idea behind them is what's important. The term lunatic was used for someone who has periods of clarity, what the law calls lucid intervals. That person can make a valid contract, but only during one of those clear moments. The term idiot, on the other hand, was used for someone with a permanent mental incapacity from birth. Any agreement they make is always void, just like a minor's.
And this same logic applies to more temporary situations too. If someone is so drunk that they can't pass that two-part test, understanding the deal and its consequences, then they're treated just like a person of unsound mind. Any contract they sign in that state is going to be void.
All right, let's hit our third and final pillar,
Beyond age and your mental state, there are a few other specific groups of people who are disqualified from making contracts, usually because of their unique status or circumstances. This is a list of pretty specific cases. For example, you can't make a contract with a citizen of a country that India is at war with. That's an alien enemy. Foreign diplomats, they have immunity, which means you can't sue them, making it almost impossible to enforce a deal. Convicts lose some of their civil rights while they're in prison, and people who are declared insolvent can't make deals about their property, mainly to protect the people they owe money to.
So we've gone through a lot of legal stuff. But how can you actually use this in the real world? Well, it all boils down to a simple, practical checklist you can run through in your head.
Here it is. Before you get into any serious agreement, just do a quick mental check on the other person. Step 1, age. Are they old enough? Step 2, mind. Do they seem to really get what they're signing and what it means for them? And step 3, status. Is there any chance they fall into one of those special disqualified groups? Now, this isn't legal advice, of course, but it's a really powerful way to think about things.
And that really brings us to the biggest takeaway here. A signature is just ink on a piece of paper unless the person behind it has the legal power to make that promise. The law draws these lines not to make life complicated, but to protect the vulnerable. So the next time you see a contract, you won't just be looking at the dotted line, you'll be thinking about the person who has to stand behind it.